The primary purpose of Uniquely Human, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. Listeners should consult with professionals familiar with each individual or family for specific guidance.
Uniquely Human, the podcast, is produced by Elevated Studio. Music is graciously provided by Matt Savage of Savage Records.
Hi, I'm Dr. Barry Prezant, clinical scholar, researcher, and consultant on autism and neurodiversity, and a Brooklyn boy raised in the big city.
And I'm Dave. I'm none of those things, and I grew up on a farm in Illinois. But being on the spectrum myself, I have plenty of personal insight to lend.
And this is Uniquely Human, the podcast, a show that illuminates and celebrates autism and neurodiversity. Today, we are so pleased to have Ellen Galinsky on with us on Uniquely Human, the podcast. Ellen, thank you for joining us.
I'm so thrilled to be with you.
A little bit about Ellen's background, and actually more than a little because she is so accomplished in so many ways. Ellen is president of the Families and Work Institute. She's conducted research on childcare, parent-professional relationship, parental development, work-family issues, and youth voice. Ellen is the author of the best-selling Mind in the Making and more than 100 books and reports, 300 articles, and most recently, very recently, her new book, The Breakthrough Years, A New Scientific Framework for Raising Thriving Teens. Other highlights, and Dave and I were talking about this just before, so excited about all these things that you've done in your experience. Other highlights include serving as a parent expert in the Mr. Rogers Talks to Parents TV series, childcare expert, Dr. T. Berry Brazelton, the late Dr. T. Berry Brazelton, on his TV series, What Every Baby Knows. And you were also the president of the National Association for the Education of Young Children. I consulted some programs where I see the poster of the NAEYC and program So Proud. You have a Master's of Science degree in Child Development and Education from Bank Street College of Education and a Bachelor of Arts in Child Study from Vassar. And you are a keynote speaker. You've presented at 5 White House conferences, including the White House Conference on Teenagers. And you've been featured regularly in the media, Good Morning America, Today Show, and the Oprah Winfrey Show. Wow. Fantastic. So we would love to tap in to just 2 of your many areas of expertise, and that's the executive function piece, as well as transitioning into the teen years, which of course is not just a challenge for kids or an exciting time, but also for families as well. So is there anything else you'd like to add to your background and what has lit your fire in terms of what you do?
I think of myself as being a research adventurer. That is, I followed my questions that I think matter to me, obviously, but I think matter to other people, where I think finding the answers would help. And I'm not interested in doing research that sits on a shelf. I'm interested in research that really informs people's lives. And as such, I don't do the kind of research where I sit there and make up what I should study. It is co-created. It's a form of research called civic science, which means that the questions are likely to come from the people who usually would be the subjects of the study. Now they're the co-creators of the study. There's a back and forth all the way through the whole process with the people whom the study is about. Most recently, adolescents. So I started by asking young people what they wanted to know about their own development, what they wanted adults to know about people their age, what I should ask researchers when I spoke to them. Took me on a completely different path, it always does. And then I went back to them I did a nationally representative study that was very informed by what they wanted to know. Also interviewed researchers, then went back to them in the middle and said, I found this, what do you think? I found that, what do you think? Took 60
Mhm.
families from the national study, and then went back again and did another national study, and then a study of executive function in schools. So there's this back and forth process. So I think the three things to know about me are I follow questions with a great deal of the kind of uncertainty that you have when you're climbing a mountain and you don't know what it's the struggle that you're going to have to get to the top of the mountain or what it's going to look like when you get there, if you ever get there, because you're always looking for new vistas. And I'm not doing this alone. I'm doing it with the people with whom or about whom the study is.
Mhm.
So that was an awkward sentence, but I'm co-creating it with the people who are in the study.
Mhm. And taking the tack that you've taken, it, it it in a funny way, it's kind of parallel, but much more in advance of what's happening in the field of neurodiversity right now, where we're finally listening to the experts who are the people with the lived experience, and which is having a big impact on just the whole research program as well as support in educational and clinical and employment settings. So
Thank
that's a
goodness, thank goodness we're doing that because, I mean, it just, even if we're neurodiverse ourselves, it's just a different experience to be a young neurodiverse person than it is to be my age, for example. And I just find it thrilling. I mean, the word is thrilling to start these adventures and ask people, what keeps you up at night? What are the things you want to know? And then as you come full cycle and you've finished your studies, what should we do with this? I'm just in that phase now with the breakthrough years. It was published today, and I'm just in the process of working with educators and superintendents and teachers, just going to launch a project with AASA where we say, okay, now how do we translate this into materials that could help? So,
and at the same time probably putting to rest many myths about
oh yes, I mean,
development.
when it comes, everything that I've ever done is just full of assumptions, some of which are true, but most of which are often not true. So I've done studies in work and family that was just full of, you know, assumptions that weren't necessarily true, in the work that I did on young children and how they learn, full of assumptions that weren't true. Just always, 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 you're battling, in a sense, you're battling a world that isn't really there. The way people see it
Mm.
and what reality is it just, and so you have to figure out as a researcher, not only what do you want to know and how do you want to know it and what you're going to do with it, you have to know how you're going to communicate it because what people think and often what you find are different. And you can just hit a brick wall, when you come up against, oh, no, 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 that's not exactly the way it is. And I'm sure you know this from the work that you're doing, that people hold on to very tightly the things that they believe and feel and think. And if you find something different, how do you how do you say it in a way that at least has a chance of being heard?
Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
it really is about opening people's hearts and minds to a new perspective and a new lens, and that's
And,
so important.
and back and forth because it's not, I mean, if you're doing what I hope I do well, if you're using civic science well, you're doing it well, you will have listened to all of that from the beginning.
Yes.
You start from a place of knowing what people think and feel and what they want to know. And so then you're hitching your wagon in a sense to their real questions, which make them more open to wanting to know.
So let's talk a little bit about executive function because not only do we have neurodivergent people, but we have family members, and we have Dave, and
Poster child.
yeah. And if you if you wouldn't mind, kind of, I feel funny using this word, but defining executive function. And why is that such an issue for us to understand? Because it impacts so many aspects of development.
Well, let me just go back a little bit in my own history.
Sure.
I started 25 years ago or 24 years ago to understand what we as a society do to dim the fire in children's eyes for learning. Children are born wanting to learn, needing to learn to survive.
Hmm.
If we can't figure out the world, we can't survive in it very well. And yet, I knew that so many kids their school engagement begins to drop. And so I didn't know what I was looking for, but I was asking the question, how do we keep the fire for learning burning in children's eyes? And I started to look at research across different fields. So everything from how do kids develop literacy, numeracy,
Hmm.
to um, their their brain development, their social, emotional, cognitive development. And I kept discovering, and now we're talking 24 years ago, I kept discovering what is executive function. It just people called it different names, but it would just come out as being highly predictive of the kids or the adults who were more likely to learn and were more likely to thrive. So what is it? Why is it so important? So I didn't even intend when I started that journey in 2001 to understand how to keep the fire burning. I didn't expect to write a book. It ended up being an accidental book because once I was discovering all of these things about executive function, and I mean discovering because I was walking across academic disciplines, and as an
Hmm.
academic, how siloed those worlds are if you're looking at sociology or psychology or cognitive development or neuroscience or pedagogy. You're just crossing different languages, different people, different studies, and they don't
Absolutely.
talk
Yeah.
to each other easily. So it was just seeing this in common. I just had the experience that so few people have is to do this. And so to, take a journey across different academic disciplines. And so what are they? Well, executive function, it's an umbrella kind of a concept. It refers to a set of skills that are attention regulation skills. They're from the cognitive control part of the brain. I'm pointing to the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And this is where largely these skills take place. And they pull together our social, emotional, and cognitive and physical capacities even to solve problems, to achieve what we want to achieve. They're always goal directed. So there are four sub-skills, in my view, of executive function skills. And those are working memory. You have to use what you know in
Mhm.
order to solve a problem. You're pulling it from whatever you've learned or new things that you're going to learn. You're pulling it from your working memory. You have to be flexible because the circumstances change. Cognitive flexibility. You have to think flexibly. The third sub-skill, many people don't include as an executive function skill, but I do. It doesn't necessarily take place in the cognitive control system. It takes place in the default mode network of the brain. But it's stepping back, it's pausing, it's reflecting. So if you're going after a goal, there's a moment when it didn't work out, and you have to step back and monitor what you're doing and saying, well, what's going on here? What do I want to do? How am I
Hmm.
going to address this? So I see this as part of the core set of skills. And then finally, self-control. Self-control or inhibitory control means that you're not going on automatic, but you're doing what you need to do to reach a goal. So those for me are the four foundational skills. Now, what they aren't is soft skills. These are not soft skills. People call them soft skills. God knows where they got that idea. They're very neurocognitive skills. I think because they're not like learning math and reading and science, but they're
Mhm.
very, very, there could not be more cognitively based skills. They're not just social, emotional, or cognitive skills. They're pulling together all of these capacities. They're not just about compliance, be quiet, listen to the teacher, follow directions, stay in your seat, those sorts of things. They include that, but some people think of them as that. They're not just about, they're not just for kids who are neurodiverse. Some people think these are just about ADHD or those
Hmm.
sorts of ways of being in the world. And I have kids in my family with ADHD, so I'm, very, very that's very much a part of my own life. Um, they are for them, but they're for all of us. These are the skills. And I think most important, these are the skills that are so fundamentally linked to success in life. Academic success, they're more important to school readiness than entry level reading or math.
Hmm.
This is Adele Diamond and Daphne Ling's work. They are predictive of academic achievement, but also health, wealth, marital satisfaction, job satisfaction. You could look at any outcome that you care about, and you'd probably find executive skills involved. There are lifetime skills. They emerge in the early years, in the preschool years. They emerge on a developmental timetable. It's whether they're developed or not depend on the experiences that kids have. And they emerge again as being very salient during the adolescence years, which is one of the reasons that I was interested in having Mind in the Making grow up and focus on the adolescent years. And then one more thing I want to say, and I know you have a bunch of questions, but one more thing I want to say, just the background for the discussion about executive function. These skills are the building blocks for what I think of as life and learning skills. So they underlie setting goals and strategies. They underlie, and you could, break that apart, how do each of those core skills underlie that. They underlie perspective taking, which is to understand how other people think and feel and how you think and feel and how others are the same and how they're different. They underlie communicating, which is figuring out what you want to say, how it's going to be heard, and how you're going to respond when it's heard or not heard. They underlie collaboration, working with other people. They underlie solving problems. They are, in fact, very, very fundamental to solving problems. And then they underlie taking on challenges, which to me is different from resilience. It's trying that next hard thing. And I think that's a life and learning skill we all need. So these are not just about compliance, which we often talk about. When I go to conferences and go to speeches on executive function, it goes down to planning, organizing, having a schedule, having a notebook,
Right.
putting your tabs on your notebook, all that stuff. Those are my grandson is learning to do those, for example, in the fifth grade. But they're also creative thinking. They're also things like seeing how things go together in one way and in a different way, which would underlie creativity. They also underlie making connections or seeing if you look at every test of intelligence, they're all about A to B, B to C, C to D kinds of questions. They're all about relational reasoning, is what it would be called in the literature. So they're just broader than that. And I think for us to begin to tackle these in the world and help promote them, which we don't do, we just sort of assume that people get them by osmosis or whatever we think they get them by, and we don't promote them. I know the school that my grandson goes to said, "Woo! Now in upper school we're going to have a half an hour a week on executive function skills," and I go, a little too little and a little too late. No, don't say that.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, that's just it. The little too little and little too late thing is what's striking me here, because when you refer to them as skills versus behaviors or habits, like gee, I have a hard time staying organized. Well, the habit that you would try to impress on somebody would be put the tabs in the notebook and make a checklist every day. Did I put my towel back up in the bathroom? Did I let the dog back in after I let the dog out? Um, and but so habits you can build. Skills are the sorts of things that you have to chip away at all the time. I even think about, I achieved a virtuosic level of saxophone acumen. And I did that by being in the practice rooms 4 hours a day for adolescence and my teen years. And then I stopped playing and I lost it overnight, all those skills.
But
But
they come back. I mean, if you
yeah,
started playing the saxophone again, I bet you'd find that you remembered, I mean, more than you thought you
oh
remembered.
yeah,
Yeah.
I still dream in saxophone, music, but which is weird. But so I bet I could still play the scales. But that's the whole point is that how can we work with people of all ages to uh, to build those skills in a way that is effective and will stay with them for life.
Well, I think that it's like, first of all, the biggest secret in the research that's not told. Now, at least when I give a speech and I say, do you know what executive functions are? People, a few people would raise their hands in the past. Now, more people do, although they still just associate it with the planning, organizing,
Hmm.
kind of thing. Um, and and it just, but if this is more predictive than IQ or as predictive as IQ, if these skills are fundamental to our, not only our academic success, but our happiness, our life success, if these skills are um, so critical in our health and wealth and well-being, why aren't we helping families, helping teachers promote them every day? You can say hello
Hmm.
to a child when the child walks into a classroom and in an executive function way or not. And I just walk into classrooms all the time and I go, missed opportunity, missed opportunity, missed opportunity, missed
Hmm.
opportunity. And it's not that teachers have to do a whole different thing. They still do what they do, but they could do so in a way that promotes executive function skills. Um, so
Absolutely.
you're reading a story and the child, usually there's some question that you're answering. Uh, so the first thing you could do is have children notice what's happening in the story. So
Hmm.
that's an executive, that's so paying attention, focusing, and then remembering the details, and then thinking about how they go together in one way or another way, rather than, what's the capital of Montana or whatever, that kind of memory kinds of things that we tend to focus on. Uh, Helping kids think relationally, think critically, think creatively, um, is just, you could do the same story with little children or big children and promote these skills or not. And that's, I'm working with AASA, the school superintendent organization, to help you do this. Let's take a discipline problem, a so-called discipline problem. Let's say the class goes wild and crazy, we'll make it little kids. The kids go crazy and they're all, there's, so and so is mad at so and so pushed so and so took someone's material from so and all, whatever happened. And instead of, we're nice and we follow the rules, and look, we have a sign up that says be nice and share. um,
Right.
right, how many schools have I been in? We could have a meeting and saying, look, we have a problem. And when people fight with each other, it doesn't work. We have to stop what we're doing. We get to do the other things we want to do. People get upset. They can't think as well when they're upset. We've got to find a way. So we don't want that kind of outburst in our classroom. You're setting the rules, you're the adult. And then you can say, well, okay, what ideas do you have to solve that problem?
Hmm.
So we're helping them learn the skill of problem solving. And you can take a list and you can write down, what's your idea? What's your idea? What's your idea? No idea is stupid. What's your idea? What's your idea? And then you go through and have the kids evaluate. Now that's an executive function skill too. They're looking
Hmm.
at, that's relational reasoning, critical thinking. What would work? What wouldn't work about your idea? Would that work for me? Would your idea work for me? Would your idea work for all the other kids? Would it work for you? And so you're asking them to take the perspective of other people, which is an executive function skill, and then think critically and then solve the problem. And then
Exactly.
you come up with a set of classroom rules for how you're dealing with conflict, that, probably will work for a little while, and then you probably have to have another meeting. But if kids own those rules, they're going to live by them in a different way. And that's for kids who are neurodiverse or for kids who I think all of us are neurodiverse. So I think that we have to recognize the diversity in everybody. I think the idea that all 3-year-olds are like this and all 4-year-olds are like this is one of the capital problems in the world that gets us into trouble.
We'd like to take a moment to thank you for listening to Uniquely Human, the podcast. It is so gratifying to hear that so many of you find value in what we share.
It is gratifying, and it's so much fun making this show together, Barry. Being able to meet with you every week and all the guests and listener support that we've received, it's such a joy to make this show. And of course, we are commercial free, but Barry and I would invite you to support this show in a number of different ways. That could be buying our books or even inviting us to speak live or virtually to your organization or to your community. To learn more about all of this, you can, of course, go to our websites, barrypresent.com or davidjfinch.com, to learn more about our speaking topics and how to work with us and all of the consultative services that we provide.
And we also want to know how we're doing. We are in a constant quality improvement mode here.
Yes.
So please make sure to leave comments and ratings, suggestions on social media. Contact us directly on the links on our website and recommend Uniquely Human, the podcast, to those in your lives. In conclusion, we are so grateful to you, our Uniquely Human community, for your support and loyalty, and we'll be keeping at it.
Yes, thank you all so much. Now back to the show.
Ellen, what I like about what you're saying in the example you just gave is you're not pointing at a child and saying you are a bad kid. You're saying there's a problem to be solved. We could do it collaboratively. You could own part of the solution by being invested in the solution in and of itself. And there's a critical problem solving, but it also has so much to do with self-awareness. It helps kids to really reflect on, why did they act that way? Why did they scream? Why did they push that child? Or also, why were they so successful in this other activity? It goes both ways. Yeah.
And you could take that same, so you have to stop and deal with a discipline issue as a teacher, whatever you want to call it, the challenging behavior, whatever you want to call this happening in a classroom. You're going to have to deal with it. You could deal with it in a way that builds skills, or you can deal in a way that fixes it for kids. And we tend to fix it for the kids. We tend not to use these moments to build the skills in children. So your saxophone playing, if you want to call it that, if we just take these skills and we start to look at them with executive function glasses, see opportunities all day long for ways that we can promote them all day long. I mean, I promise you that nothing happens in the world where I don't think of how could we promote skills this way. Yeah. Now that I see
sure. And at home, it has to carry through. Like it can't end at the school day. Parents really have to be proactive in setting the executive function way of dealing with things at home as well.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example from I call this process shared solutions. In the breakthrough years, there was this child had ADHD. He would come home from school. He needed to veg out. School was stressful. He would make a beeline for the couch where his games were. On the way, he would be littering all of his, his backpack, all of his school stuff. It would be, beside him in a flurry all the way to the couch. And his mom, and then he would be busy. So his mom had this choice of, and his dad had this choice of, well, we can finish our work. He's quiet right now. This is, although the house is a mess and he's supposed to clean up, and he's probably going to be really cranky when he has to get off of his games. So, well, maybe it's a temporary solution, but it's not going to work for very long. And rather than all the things that parents do, yelling at kids, setting the rules for them, you have to clean up when you walk in, all that stuff. They had this shared solutions meeting with their child, again, a kid with ADHD. And he said the mom had to be, the father had to tell the mom not to keep coming up with all the ideas, let him have the ideas.
Right.
Yeah. So
So,
his idea, though, I love his idea, which was if he walked into a different door from school, uh, that door that he walked into would be like a reset. It's different. And it's
hmm,
also the door where there are places to put your backpack and your stuff, so you're not throwing it on the floor. You can just put it down. Then he wanted a timer. He wanted to have a choice about whether he did his video games or his homework first. He would have a timer if he was going to do his video games for 45 minutes, and he would set the timer and then follow it. And I mean, this sounds easy, and for some kids, it would not be easy at all. I'm not, I live with real kids, so I don't mean to oversimplify it, but it was working. This mother was just astounded, for the first 3 days, the last time I talked to her, her son was coming in, putting his stuff away, and making a choice about whether he did his homework first or his games first, and getting off of them after 45 minutes. And there wasn't the household high drama that there usually was about getting your homework done and cleaning up the house.
it really strikes me about, the mental health implications of this. In the example you just gave, this young man probably felt really good about himself. And then going forward in the future, there's that sense of, yeah, I could handle this, that I'm hitting a wall, or I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm really irritable and tired and much more disorganized. But okay, pull it together. Okay. And that sense of confidence, because certainly with so many of our listeners, whether they're on the spectrum, neurodivergent, or family members who are listening, we know that a child could just really feel lousy about him or herself if they know they're not doing well.
And that so worries me about the so-called mental health crisis that we have in this country. Um, I don't think anyone can deny the fact that 21% 10 years ago said that they were feeling hopeless and sad, and now it's 42%, that the CDC data are
Mm-hmm.
really troubling, and that we need to do something about this. But what we're doing, which is saying this generation is anxious, or this generation is depressed, or this generation is messed up, or, we're just labeling a whole generation. And
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying about the child who felt good of themselves, I mean, nobody wants to be labeled, whether or not you're feeling anxious at the moment or really have a diagnosis of anxiety. You want to be more than your worst moments, as kids said to me. And so it's just heartbreaking to me what we're doing with this information as a society. We're labeling the kids, in attempting to deal with mental health, rather than take a strength-based and asset-based approach, which is, we know from interventions time and time again, that building on strengths, building on what people are doing right, helping them feel competent one step at a time, and then helping them as they get better feel like helpers. You can help yourself best when you help other people.
Yeah.
And so helping people become helpers is critical to mental health. There's so many other things too, but there are just so many things that we could do to make it better.
And that mental health as they carry it into adulthood, this is when we talk about neurodivergent kids transitioning into young adults and adulthood, the ability to, when you have grown up in a household, in maybe an academic setting that favored shared solutions and creative solutions to things, where everybody has a voice and it's taken seriously, these are the same people who will need to ultimately self-advocate at the university level and the professional level. And so you're starting that habit of coming up with your own solutions and recommending them to the authority figures in a constructive way. It's brilliant.
And it can be little things, coming in a different door. It's a little thing, but it's a
Yeah.
big, and I don't think any adult would have thought of that,
Right.
frankly.
And the power of feeling heard, that goes for any human being.
Yeah, we all want to feel heard. We all want to feel known. And Dan Stern, of whom you probably know, worked with Barry Brazelton. Remember Dan Stern?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I-
Okay, so Dan, was the father of friends of mine now. He always said that every human being just wants to be known and understood. And I mean, I
Absolutely.
think that so often from Dan Stern.
Yes. I was fortunate enough also. He was on the faculty in the department I was in, but he was half-time Geneva, half-time in Providence at the time. But
Well,
it's, well, I'm thinking about the family piece now. I'm thinking about parents' perspectives and feeling challenged emotionally themselves when maybe their idea is they want their child to be, I don't want to say perfect, but getting it right 95% of the time. Because I think it's so important for kids to understand, you know, you can do better. We're not going to always be right. We're not going to always be organized. We're not going to always be able to deal with our emotions. Um, but what would you say to family members who, in terms of their reactivity to a child who may have some very neurologically based significant problems with just organizing their lives and their emotions?
well, first I would say that there's a developmental progression in parenthood, just like there, and you said that, just like there is for kids. And so the progression in parenthood is you start out wanting a perfect child. We just do want a perfect child.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, however we define perfection, we want that. We want the best that we can possibly have. And then, nobody's perfect. So we have to reconcile reconcile our expectations with reality. And that
Mm-hmm.
happens to every parent with a neurodiverse child or not. No child fits our image of exactly who we thought we were going to have. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's that process of reconciling our expectations with reality. That is, in fact, the moment for growth. If we
Mm-hmm.
could understand that process of having an expectation, having it not come true, or having ourselves not live up to the expectation, and that process, this is what I found in the studies that I did of parental development, that's normal. So we go from wanting the perfect child to hopefully wanting the child, the good enough child, the child we
Good
have,
enough.
and knowing that we're good enough too. That's one thing that I would say. The second is that we all learn through trial and error. So we've made mistakes like this wrong thing. You shouldn't make a mistake. And okay, yes, schools have posters saying making mistakes is part of learning. But if we understood it actually slightly differently, which is that we all learn through trial and error. That's just the way we learn. So it's that trial and error versus mistakes and getting it right. We reframe that. That would be something that I think is important. And then I think the world puts a lot of expectations and pressures on parents. So it isn't
Mm-hmm.
just parents thinking of all this by themselves. There's the school wants to have a good record of whom they get into which college or university too. They're going to get their funding or not on how the kids are doing on standardized tests. So it's we're living in a world that makes it hard for us. I mean, I actually think that schools should measure family engagement and student engagement versus just test scores, not just versus, but should, if we were measuring whether the kids were engaged in learning, we might start teaching in different ways. That's another story. But I think helping that's the journey of parenthood is, and I sometimes think a diagnosis is actually a relief.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't, it's like you didn't do something awful. This is the child who needs glasses, the child who has ADHD. If you could
Hmm.
just see it as, if we could just see it that way, as like some kids need glasses, some kids don't, some kids have ADHD and they need medication, or they don't need medication, depending on how you're handling it. Some kids are on the spectrum, some kids aren't, hey, cool. If we could just understand that normal is so diverse, which is what the neurodivergent field is doing. And normal depends on where you sit. I love David Rose's story about his wife who has perfect pitch, and who's normal there, the person with perfect pitch or the perfect person without. And I think understanding that perspective is just wonderful. We just have a lot of work as a society to really help kids thrive. So that's probably not going to happen so quickly. I'll work on it. You'll work on it. You'll all work on it. We'll all work on it. But in the meantime, we've got real parents struggling with all of these pressures and real kids struggling with all of these pressures. And we just have to say to kids that this is the way it is, but we're going to try to make the best of it. In a sense, we're going to help you learn skills to manage this. Or if somebody says something that's hurtful, we're going to handle it. Yes, of course you should react strongly, but we're going to handle it in a different way, or we're going to figure out how to handle it together, whatever you say. But just, chipping away at it, both with our own skills and in the worlds that we create.
I think the acceptance is really important for both. I mean, it's a really hot button issue, I think, for the parents coming together as a parenting unit or a family unit. And what I mean by that is that so many times I hear, I'll just use, like, for example, the father will refuse or reject the whole idea that my son or daughter is on the spectrum, right? And they're just kids being kids, and the mom is insisting, no, this makes a lot of sense. Like, why are you so opposed to this diagnosis? And it's much different from, and that therein lies the challenge, the behavioral stuff versus, well, clearly this child can't see the blackboard, they need glasses, or, clearly this is a gastrointestinal issue. Why? Because we did a scope and we can see it. Behavior appears to be so subjectively, determined that if the parents can't get on the same page, good luck,
really hard.
giving the kid what they need.
Yeah, really hard. Yeah. And with neuropsychs, you can begin to see scores, and so it's not, or so that there are ways of looking at it, and somehow or other, if you use the word brain, it makes people go, oh, the brain. So it is hard. But I have a slightly different view of a lot of this stuff, which is that I think that it's not a view that's outside of psychological theory. It's very much mainstream, but I think that we, just like we have the physical needs to food, water, and shelter, no one would deny that. I think what we are much less aware of is that we all have the need to belong. We have the need for support, which I would call caring connections. We all have the need to have some say over our lives, and we all have the need to be treated with respect, which I would call agency. We all have the need to feel competent, but to feel challenged, which I would call mastery. We all have the need to figure out who we are, and we all have the need to find things in life that are meaningful in ways that we contribute, which I would call purpose, or with a small p. Not find your purpose in life, but little ways of contributing. And so I think these are basic psychological needs. This is self-determination theory in the psychological literature, where they've proven for 30, 40 years that we have a set of basic psychological needs. And so if we could understand the need for belonging or acceptance as a basic psychological need, then families might feel differently about not accepting who the child is, and finding ways to make sure that the environment, for kids to thrive, they need to feel that they belong. They just do. And so, and we don't know it. I mean, the example in my own life was, this is before COVID, but when I had an infection and I got put in isolation, they didn't know what it was. And so they put me, into the serious isolation in a hospital till they figured out it was nothing. But in the meantime, I just was in a world where I didn't belong. And it just makes you remember how that feels to a kid when that happens to you. So we need to understand that we as adults are responsible. It's not coddling. It's meeting a basic psychological need that everybody needs to feel that they belong. And if you feel that way, then you can thrive.
And in the community that we interact most with, the shift just recently has been, especially with people with very clear disabilities, it's shifted from, okay, we want you to be independent. Okay, let's train you to be independent. And finally, people are embracing interdependence. That we're all part of this fabric, woven into this fabric, and we have to embrace that and also learn how to rely on other people when we need to. It's so
We're
important.
never independent, and then your world is ahead of the main, whatever we call the other world. But because I hear the word independence all the time, and when I wrote the book, The Six Stages of Parenthood, and that was in the 80s, I refused to use the word independent. There was Margaret Mahler, if you remember all those old theories, saying from separation, you individuate and you become
Integration.
independent. It was sort of this straight line from merger with the mother to independence. And I was like, no, 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 no. And actually, Dan Stern was one of the people who said, no, 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 no. We're born, we're born, as individuals, and we have to form these relationships and keep up these relationships all of our lives. That was another
Right.
thing I learned from Dan Stern.
And musically notating the interactions between babies and their mothers.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes, like a dance.
Like a
Yes,
dance. Absolutely.
I love that research. I love the research that Barry and others did on attunement and
And,
Dan.
and we have to keep their messages alive because people
Because
are too
people,
quick to move on. So,
and I have videos of both Dan and Barry Brazelton from the work that I did on Mind in the Making. So I can bring Barry, and I do, to
wonderful.
groups all the time.
Wonderful. Right. Well, this has been absolutely enlightening. I think we could, pour a glass of wine and just keep going for a while here.
I'm going out with my husband to celebrate publication day,
Oh,
so
that's right. Oh, yeah.
wine is in my future.
Big, big, big celebration. That's wonderful. Ellen, it's so generous of you on such a busy day and busy time to join us. And I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So,
Well, it's a pleasure. I really, when you invited me, I thought I really would like to celebrate Publication Day with you all. I'm really happy that my book is born into the world now, and I'm happy that I'm celebrating it with you.
Can't wait to
that's
read it.
fantastic. Absolutely
Thank
fantastic.
you. Thank you.
Take care, Ellen. Have a wonderful celebration.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.